where it talks about the formula is basically dissatisfaction times the vision times the first steps must be greater than the resistance. And you don't battle the resistance, you actually lean into the resistance. What you do is you amp up the dissatisfaction. Like, so what are we dissatisfied about?
Mm-hmm.
Our school's successful? Is our school successful? Do we have a unicorn vision that school can be like Google, Disney, and Ron Clark Academy all balled into one? And then what are our first steps? What are those small steps we can take to get us where we need to be? I
Yeah.
mean, change, it has to be done in steps like that, but you're right. I mean, I don't get why it's so hard to change sometimes, but I got to remember to step back. I'm a person that thrives on change, but not everyone is that way. But it also, we got to remember it's worth it for our kids.
So do you find when you go into schools and you're taking on this role as transformation coach, have you, and Brady Venables, have you come up against a lot of resistance so that you almost feel like it's hopeless? Or, how do you contend with people who really don't see your vision and they don't want to change, and you almost get the feeling like kids aren't their priority?
Why you got to go there, Jen Fraser?
I'm
I
sorry.
Okay, so I never want to assume that kids are not our priority as educators, and we know that. But then you're going to force me to be super transparent. We also feel that sometimes that's not the case, or maybe it is that a teacher feels so bogged down by other things that the priority kind of slips through her fingers, and sometimes it takes an adjustment for all of us to get back on track and remember thing one, which are the students and impacting their lives. um, there are people that forget that ultimate mission, and sometimes, just like building the dissatisfaction, it takes more and more hard conversations. um, I read an email just today when someone was upset with kind of like a little speech that I gave to a group of educators, where I was saying, please let's not forget that we're not contracted employees. I mean, we work on a contract. We're not classified employees. We don't work 8 hours only. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if we need us as a team to work an hour before school, because this is what we need to make the change that we need to better ourselves and our students, then that's just what we have to do. And I think I came off as someone that did not have empathy with that for people that have children or other jobs or things like that. And I thought I was, being careful and leading with empathy. But my problem personally that I have to work on myself is because of my past that we talked about, because of my background, and because what it took to get me here. I have that no excuses mantra.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear the reasons why we can't do something. I want to talk about why we haven't already.
Yep. Well, you know what? I mean, so I found it really, it was really moving for me to read this concept that you brought to the table about, I want to be the teacher that wasn't there for me when I was a kid. Because, as you know, I'm working on, my wheelhouse is abuse, child abuse. So
Mm-hmm.
I know that people do not want to talk about a teacher that might abuse children. In fact, people so badly don't want to talk about it that people look the other way when it's happening. It's that hard for people to breach that social taboo. It's even hard to say the sentence. And I've dealt with teachers where the second you say that sentence, you have them turn on you and they circle the wagons and they tell you you hate teachers and you're a bad person. I get that a fair bit. And what I realized is, it's a kind of, it's a dangerous place to go because basically children get hurt. And if we are passionate about kids and kids' education and digging deep and being able to look in the mirror all the time in this profession, because this isn't a normal profession. It's
It's not.
no, it's not a punch the clock. Your heart is not in it. You can't
No.
just teach your subject. You're dealing with the most vulnerable people on the planet. So you got to rise up to that, or you're not, the kids aren't at your forefront. And so one of the things that I thought a lot about when I was going to interview you is when I was in high school, and it's very parallel to your situation in a way. I was in high school and I was, same thing, like my marks were terrible. I got a C- in English literature when I was in grade 12. I was voted the most poorly dressed girl. I wore sweatpants every single day. And what I was unable to tell anybody, including my parents, let alone teachers or psychologists later or psychiatrists, was I was being emotionally and sexually abused by my teachers. And it took me until my own son was suffering an abuse situation at his school 30 years later before I found the, I don't know what it is, mental strength, or the blinders dropped from my eyes, or I found the words, and I started to be able to articulate what happened. And it became a court case. Like, girls, I wasn't the only victim. There was a lot of victims. It went on for 20 years. And in the research
Oh
that
my
I've,
God.
yeah, you know what though? In the research that I've done, that's common. USA Gymnastics, Alpine Canada, Catholic Church, it goes on for years and years and years. And I can't help but ask the really tough question: how is it possible that no teacher ever knew what was going on? How is it possible that no administrator ever knew what was going on? I mean, half of the abuse really was in public. What they were doing was just very sketchy and wrong. And I didn't have a teacher who ever asked me if I was okay, and I had no words to tell the story. So it goes back to this piece around needing teachers or coaches who can come in and interview children and sit down, be trusted, be separate from the school and the community maybe even, and let these kids tell them what's happening. I think that needs to be one of the changes we see in schools.
First, Jen, I'm blown away. I did not know that about your background. Um, so I want to say I'm sorry that that happened to you, and I'm sorry that there wasn't someone there for you in the school system. I mean, that is the epitome of you right now, also being who you needed when you were younger. I mean, you were
Yep.
fighting that fight.
Yep.
You're still fighting that fight. Um, and I have no words for how does that happen, except to say something that you said earlier. Is some people don't want to see that.
Yep.
Um, it's very easy to look the other way when you don't have the skills to do something, and you are scared to follow through. I mean, how many times as an administrator, I'm thinking back to my early years as an administrator, I knew I should walk into the teacher's room who was struggling the most, and I should be there more frequently. Now, I have learned my lesson since then, and I'm 100% better. But I would walk by that room, hear the chaos, know that there were things happening in there, and I don't think it was things that were physically or sexually abusive, not like that. But I still would turn away because I didn't want to deal with it.
Yep.
And not only didn't want to deal with it, I didn't have a solution right then to fix it besides just scooping up all the children with me and taking them out and saying, okay, I promise, guys, I will find you another teacher. You know, if I have to teach you myself, which, true story, me and another friend actually did take over a classroom when a teacher had to leave, and I was an administrator.
Yep. Yep.
At the time. Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that, except that you tell your story and you keep putting it out there. And you talked about having someone that can talk to the students, because kids don't have the words either unless they're given the avenue or see that even is an option for them. Um, my husband is a forensic interviewer because he was a cop, and that's something he's let me watch a practice interview that he had to do one time for training. And I thought, you know what? I thought, oh, honey, you're just forensic interviewer. That takes some real skill
Mm-hmm.
to get someone who you do not know to open up. And some people, they want you to ask them. That's all they've been doing their whole lives is waiting to be asked.
Yep.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you talk about a need. We do
Well,
need interviews.
I think that there's a place for, well, this is something I've talked to other teachers about and administrators and people out in the sport world, and I'd be really curious to hear what your thoughts are on this. I wonder what it would be like if we had a reporting system that was just across the board, all schools, all sport organizations, whatever, Boy Scouts. We had a reporting system. And it wasn't that the child reported and it went straight to the school itself, or it went straight to the Catholic Church, or it went straight to USA Gymnastics. Because what we know, and we just have to be honest with ourselves and be brave enough to face this, what happens is when you report an adult to people that know the adults, conflict of interest kicks in. They end up protecting the adult and not the child. Because, as you say, and all of us have experienced this in our lives, we all know it to be true, it's so difficult and painful and upsetting to cope with an adult that's kind of making a mistake. Like if you see an adult who's not parenting well, I think all of us just kind of like, oh, we want to help. We would never say anything to them. We want to protect the kid. We still would never say anything. I mean, it's taboo. You just don't do it. So in institutions, it gets out of control. And what happens is these people, even though everybody knows about it, the abuse goes on and on and on year and year and year after. So what we need to do is create some sort of a system where, we have the internet now, so we can do this. We have kids where they can report in anonymously and safely, goes to a third-party housing station, and a clean report gets sent to the school or the Catholic Church or whatever. But it's a watchdog. And so the school administrator goes to their buddy and says, I hate to do this to you, but you got to take 3 weeks off and get better. You need to do some rehab around this. This isn't okay. I've got 3 or 4 reports now. I'm worried for you. I don't blame you. I don't shame you. I don't want to hurt you, but you need to take some time off and get better. And we're going to support you. We're going to pay for that because people can get better.
Right. And so are you asking my thoughts of what I think about creating a system like that?
Yeah. Do you think is that a possibility? Would that make kids more safe? Would it make them more able to open up and tell what's really going on for them? If we taught them about, hey, at any moment, you can just download this, you can report this, you can tell your story. It will ask you some more questions, like your husband, a proper person who asks the right questions. And we get the information that we need about what's really going on behind closed doors.
I do think that would be a good idea, but if I back it up, I think what even happens before that, and I know that there is some legislation, especially in our state, about teaching. First, so many students need to be taught what abuse is. What are the forms?
Exactly.
What is sexual abuse? Because if you are raised with your father molesting you in the home, you don't know that that's not what everybody else is going through.
Exactly.
That's your norm. So I remember we instituted in middle school an Olveus bullying prevention program. Have you ever heard of that particular program?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's research based, and so that was step one before reporting all of the bullying incidents that were going on. Is we did a very intense program of teaching. So what does this mean to bully? Like someone having an advantage, and how do you spot it? And then how do you go against the bystander effect? And did all of this education. And what happened at the beginning was, a lot of things reported. Because first of all, students didn't realize, oh my gosh, I've totally experienced that.
Yeah.
So I think that, as a system, I think we have to get better at teaching students and children to recognize what it even is. And teachers aren't that comfortable, in my experience, teaching what sexual abuse is.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you need more expertise to have, someone else come in and assist us with that.
Well, I really think that we're at a place where if we could get teachers to open up the floodgates on what is teacher bullying and allow them to really have like incredible